Hey, this is Rick, aka Concrete River. So I have four new Flavorwest cake flavors to try. So these are all brand new flavors. Before anybody asks, they don't have the SDS sheets up for them yet, so they could contain lead for all I know. It would, worst case scenario, they're like Flavorwest yellow cake, which has sugar syrup or fructose in it. So I don't have any actual information on whether or not you should be vaping these, but of course I am going to vape these. So the video is named Too Many Cakes for a reason. My big goal in doing this is to find out if there's anything in here that really works as a cake better or adds anything new and interesting to the old standby, like Flavor West yellow cake, or like Jungle Flavors yellow cake, or Capella's yellow cake if you're a coward. So these are all 4% samples. They've all been steeped for about 6 days. So you're pushing that week where you want to try to start vaping your bakery flavors. Starting out, I have Flavor West birthday cake. I'm expecting something obnoxiously bright. We'll see how it turns out. Okay, so at 4%, getting a pretty decent cake body to it. The actual cake texture underneath the frosting is pretty good. Doesn't taste like yellow cake in that it doesn't have that sort of richer, eggier note to it. It tastes a little bit thin, which is probably accurate to like a white cake, but there's a good texture. It just doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of like really unctuous cake flavor there. So the frosting note there definitely has some vanilla to it. Um, it seems like a relatively light frosting note compared to that base. It doesn't seem like frosting then cake. It definitely seems cake then frosting. The birthday cake part of this. So I'm still not 100% sure what a birthday cake flavor is, like what the scientific definition of what makes a birthday cake. But my working hypothesis is basically you want that kind of very sweet, uh, sort of over the top, sort of batter flavor. So my usual go to for that birthday cake flavor is adding a little bit of cake batter dip to Flavor West's yellow cake, because if you're gonna get cancer, you might as well go hard. um, this doesn't really seem to measure up to that. It doesn't have that same sort of obnoxious over the top sweetness. It does seem to have a little bit of like an artificial note at the end of the vanilla. And I think, sort of like with Flavor West Sprinkles flavor, they're kind of using that artificial note to stand in for like food coloring, and that kind of like heavily colored, sort of bright, like optically bright cake that level of food coloring tends to add its own sort of like chemical flavor to it. And I'm definitely getting like a little bit of a chemical edge to the back end of that vanilla frosting. For a birthday cake, I'd expect this to be heavier on the frosting, heavier on the sweetness, just kind of obnoxious all around. And this is pretty restrained for a Flavor West birthday cake flavor. Yeah, like I said, I'm digging the texture. I think it's a pretty good base. It doesn't quite read as birthday cake for me. Like I honestly just want to add some cake batter dip to this. Um, but next cake flavor I have is Flavor West's white cake. And just right off the bat, I like this a little bit more. It doesn't seem to have that heavy artificial note to the vanilla frosting. Like that bitterness after the sweetness. Again, seems pretty heavily balanced towards the actual cake part of the equation. That texture seems to be maybe just a little bit cardboardy, just because it doesn't have a lot of the same richer notes that I've come to associate with like yellow cake. It's much flatter, less rich flavor, but it still has some of that graininess to it. I'm getting something that tastes almost a little bit floury from it. Which kind of helps to sell the white cake thing. Like there definitely seems to be more of a grain to this than the birthday cake, and it may just be that that artificial frosting note isn't really interfering with the base. It could be a very similar base, but this doesn't taste as rich as the yellow cake, but it does taste a little bit richer than the birthday cake. Frosting note does have a little bit of a tangier note to it. It's definitely still vanilla frosting, but it does taste just a little bit tangier. Um, I'm not saying it's spot on to like a buttercream that you'd find on like a wedding cake, but it's definitely further in that direction than something like, Duncan Hines frosting straight out of the can. Yeah, it's not bad. The sweetness here is kind of shot through the entire flavor, like it isn't neutral cake base and then a sweet frosting. It feels like the entire thing's been sweetened, which is probably because I'm vaping it, not actually eating it. But I'd like a little bit more separation, that sweetness. I think I'd like a slightly drier grain note and then like that sweet heavy frosting. Instead, the entire thing takes on that kind of sugary character. But yeah, for like a white cake base, I think this is probably preferable for me to the birthday cake, just because while I see where they're going with the birthday cake and that artificial note, it's not necessarily all that pleasant to vape, and this is pretty nondescript, which is kind of nice for a white cake base. So, moving on, I have Flavorwest creamy chocolate cake. Again, testing at 4%. So these are new flavors. They don't have descriptions. There's no other reviews available to really pull from. But the picture that they use on their website is of like one of the Hostess ding dongs, the chocolate pucks basically, which have the waxy chocolate on the outside, the chocolate cake inside, and then that kind of Hostess cream filling. All right, so tasting this back to back with the white cakes, you definitely can pick up the chocolate. It's not like a really strong, aggressive chocolate flavor, so I feel like it's not really doing a great job of emulating like the waxy coating there. Instead, it's doing sort of a passable chocolate cake. The chocolate cake, the actual chocolate in there isn't bad. It seems like it's about at the right level, if maybe just a little bit weak for the actual chocolate taste in a cake. And you definitely get some of the sweetness from the cream filling, if not really. Feeling like there's like a clear textural delineation between the two. It all just kind of feels like a big mass. It doesn't have the same kind of like separation between the flavors that the white cake and the birthday cake do, where you can taste frosting then cake. This just tastes like a sweetened chocolate cake. It doesn't have the waxy coating. I'm not sure this is going to be particularly useful then, just because I feel like you have to hang so many things on this flavor to get it to really hit the profile that you're probably better off starting without it. I think if you're looking for a chocolate cake base and you aren't opposed to a little bit of a coconut note, Flavorwest Chocolate Deutsch is actually really good for a chocolate cake. And I think I'd rather sort of use that and then try to build my cream into it as opposed to trying to accentuate the parts of the flavor that are here. The waxier chocolate coating is going to be a little bit hard. I haven't quite figured out how to get like a solid wax on something and actually make it feel coated, but you might be able to use some of the same tricks that you're using for like Starburst candies and stuff, where you attach like vanilla swirl or vanilla bean gelato to kind of get that waxy mouthfeel. Maybe even like Cap's buttercream, which tastes super waxy to me, and then put a stronger chocolate flavor in there. This one I'd probably skip just because I don't want to have to do that much work to actually hit the profile. It's not an awful single flavor though. I mean, I'd probably vape that, to crank that up to like 8-10%, maybe even add a little bit of sweetener and go ahead and have like my own little shitty commercial juice like nostalgia thing. But as like a fully fledged flavor, based on that ding dong profile, it doesn't quite do it for me. So the last juice I have to try, the last flavor I have to try is Flavorwest's creamy sponge cake. So again, I'm kind of relying on the pictures that they're actually using to advertise it. They have a picture of a Twinkie, which is awesome. So I'm going to give this a shot. Okay, so the filling here seems to be working quite a bit better. I'm getting a little bit more separation between that Twinkie type of filling and the actual yellow cake on the outside. And you can pick up some of the richness from that sponge cake, like some of the eggier texture, maybe even like some of like the drier, slightly crispier notes from the outside of the sponge cake. I'm getting just like a little bit of like a muddy anise flavor that I tend to get with a lot of bakeries towards the back end. I think it's something with the vanilla and then the actual cake base. Yeah. So overall, I think this does a lot of things better than the creamy chocolate cake. I feel like there's a clearer separation between that sweet filling flavor. The actual flavor of the sponge cake is also coming through a little bit cleaner. It also doesn't have like the extra curveball of trying to deal with like a waxy chocolate coating on there. It's just more of a straight ahead Twinkie flavor. It's not bad. I could actually see this being used in quite a few sweeter bakeries. I think if you wanted to go full Twinkie with it, you might need to reinforce the individual parts of the concentrate, but this has like enough of a Twinkie character that I feel like it wouldn't be a waste of time actually accentuating what's already here. Yeah, that one isn't bad. So the name of the video, sorry, I need to clear my palate, with some Shasta Club Soda. It's my choice. It should be yours too. That's sparkling, refreshing, and affordably priced. Okay, so point of this video, or I guess the point of the title of this video, is too many cakes. So my big question when people start releasing like multiple variations of similar flavors is, what do these bring to the table that aren't already there, especially when you're talking about concentrates within the same flavor line from a single manufacturer. So Flavorwest already has a fantastic yellow cake flavor, fructose and all. It's a great flavor. So I'm not really getting a whole lot that makes me want to grab these over straight yellow cake. It doesn't seem like they really solve any of the issues that I have with yellow cake. So just as a basis for comparison, I do have a tester of yellow cake, and it's pushing 6 months old at this point. But I figure it might be a useful comparison. I am dripping it over the birthday cake because I have run out of RDAs that I want to test on. So, cardinal sin right there. So with the yellow cake, I'm getting a little bit more richness to the cake, which I actually really like. I think if you don't have that richness to cake and it's in a complex mix, it's really hard to sort of miss what makes it a cake. If you just got like kind of an underflavored texture thing, your actual flavors in the mix are going to go ahead and run all over the cake flavor if you don't have like a fairly strong, assertive cake flavor. And I feel like Yellow Cake by Flavorwest does. I also really like the way that this one handles the frosting. Because this definitely seems to have like a sweet frosting note to it. And that frosting isn't obtrusive, but I feel like it's really well balanced and it does a really good job of accentuating the cake base. It's substantial enough that you can kind of grab onto it and sort of enjoy the cake base underneath it and kind of take it all in as a yellow cake flavor. I mean, obviously, there's fructose in here. And I'm not going to pretend like I could taste it if I didn't know it was in there. But looking for it, you do get kind of that sweetness and you get like some of those really, really mild, like coil gunk burnt notes, which I'm guessing is from the fructose. But basically, it tastes like sweet, delicious cancer. Um, which isn't nearly as bad as it sounds. But taking that as sort of a baseline for the rest of these cake flavors, I don't really see much of a point in the birthday cake flavor. That artificial note is definitely different than the white cake flavor, but it doesn't feel like an artificial birthday cake note to me. It just feels like sort of some artificial weirdness at the end of a white cake flavor. The white cake is actually a pretty good sort of neutral cake base. And I think holding on to that one and using it when I want just like a light touch of cake so I can play around with some more delicate flavors, some delicate fruit flavors like as an accent, I think that's going to be really useful. The creamy chocolate cake, it doesn't really hit the profile for me, and it also doesn't really do chocolate cake well enough that I want to keep it around as like a general chocolate cake additive. The creamy sponge cake is actually pretty good, the Twinkie flavor, and I think that's going to be something that appeals to a lot of people. There's a good balance on the filling. The actual sponge cake note is pretty good. So, to answer my own question, I think this might be too many cakes. I think the white cake is good, but it's going to be a little bit specialized. It's going to be really easy to overpower. I think the creamy sponge cake is probably worth picking up if you're interested in Twinkie vapes at all. I do have deep fried sponge cake by Real Flavors, their super concentrate version, and their bakeries just don't really work for me. They feel like a little bit underflavored, a little flat. So if you're having problems with the Real Flavors super concentrates, I know that some people swear by them, but and you really want a Twinkie flavor, that's probably worth checking out. But yeah, I don't see any of these really dethroning cancer cake as the king. And going back and looking at like Capella's yellow cake and Jungle Flavors yellow cake, both of those do a really good job of actually tasting. They don't taste as rich, and they each have like their own weird off notes, but I think they definitely sort of evoke a cake a little bit more cleanly and clearly than some of these other flavors. But I hope that helps if you're considering picking up these flavors. My next video, I'm going to go ahead and cover Flavorwest's glazed donut, their funnel cake, and probably their waffle cone. So for the glazed donut and the funnel cake specifically, I realize there's other flavors available in that profile.